Hey, welcome to week 2 of our kickoff series, All In. Last week, we oriented our teaching around the simple phrase, we got to do church different. Now, we didn't mean different styles or different methodologies. We're talking about things of substance, that we need to become a church that's both deep and wide. Deep in Jesus' kingdom, wide in Jesus' ministry. And as part of the teaching, we kind of mused around this thought that we need less Christians in culture and society flexing, and we need more Christians serving. And our example this week comes from John chapter 13. Jesus is in the last hours, days, moments of his earthly ministry, and he's gathered around a meal table in the ancient Far East, and he has a lesson for them. I'm going to pick it up at verse 1. I'm going to read these first 5 verses with you. John chapter 13. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who are in the world, he loved them to the end. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he had wrapped around himself. This is an incredible passage. Jesus, from cosmic sovereign to common towel ministry. What an incredible place to be. Did you catch, though, in that passage, it said that Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his control. Jesus knows he's in charge in this moment. He has betrayers, he has deserters all around him that night, all his followers, but they're at an emotional high. They think this is trending in the right direction. He knows what's going to happen, and he has all the power in the room. You can tell a lot about a person by how they use their power. When somebody is dependent upon them or they have power over someone, Woodward, the author, said this. He said that absolute power doesn't corrupt, but rather reveals character. So what does Jesus do? I mean, he has all the power. He's in charge. He's in control. And he's got guys around him that are going to desert him and betray him. What does he do? He serves. He serves. Why would he serve them, though? Because he's motivated from a place of love. It's very interesting. In the Gospel of John, the first 12 chapters, love is mentioned 6 times. In the last 6 chapters, love is mentioned 31 times. It's as if in that tail end of Jesus' ministry, he wants to get this rooted in his followers, that love is at the root of everything that we do. At our One Church TO, we have this logo, and it's a heart logo. And some people call it a V. It kind of looks like it, but it is really an image of 2 buildings kind of put together. And the idea is simply this, that we're all different at this church. We have 75 nationalities a part of this church, 5 generations. We have a digital campus. We have an in-person campus, but we are one church in Toronto. But I couldn't help but think of that logo this week when I thought of Jesus' journey. Theologians kind of call it a bit of a V journey. He's in heaven, and he descends from heaven. He leaves his home in heaven at the right hand of the Father, and he descends to the earth. And in humility, he's born in a manger, but he pierces through the earth. In his death, he's laid low in the bowels of creation. But then he's risen up, and he ascends back to the Father in heaven. So there's kind of V motion to the trajectory of Jesus' earthly ministry. Well, you can see that V actually in this story. Jesus is in the seat of honor. He's the rabbi, the teacher, the healer, the miracle worker. Everybody esteems Jesus in that room. And he rises up, and I'm sure they imagined, what's Jesus going to say? What's the important thing he's going to say? And he disrobes. He wraps a towel around his waist. And he gets on his knees and washes his disciples' feet. What a humbling position he took. It's a foreshadow, though, of what's going to happen. In a little short while, he will be disrobed again, but not by his own hands, but his creation will disrobe him. They will push him down as he carries a cross to the place called Golgotha. And he won't be raised up to the Father. Instead, he will be raised up on this criminal's cross, an act of utter humiliation in that moment. You know, I can't imagine being one of those disciples, how humiliating it would have felt to be have your feet washed by someone like Jesus. Wait, Jesus, what are you doing? I should be doing this. I couldn't help but think of when I read the passage during the pandemic and even before, a big shout out to all our PSWs and healthcare workers that are part of our church, or if you're just listening in, thank you. Thank you for serving people. And you do sometimes the necessary but humble work of even cleaning people that can no longer do it for themselves. That's humble work. That's humility at work there. And it's also incredibly humbling to have someone wash you. It strips away some of our dignity. It makes us feel exposed. We have nothing to hide from or hide away. There's no barrier now. But that's how we come to Jesus. Jesus is our PSW. And we need to be washed because we're dirty. We can't wash ourselves. We need to be cleansed because we can no longer cleanse ourselves. Jesus plunges into the murky filth of our own existence and the things we've done wrong in our own brokenness. And he pierces into that mess of humanity so we can be made whole, so we can be restored. Why would he do this? Love. Love demands service. And Jesus, it's pretty interesting. Jesus, when he gets down on the ground and he begins to wash his disciples' feet, he's identifying with those most marginalized people in the culture and the society at that time. The unseen, the unheard. He gives voice to them and he gives eyes to them. It'd often be the job of a slave or a woman in that culture. It was a demeaning place to be. So what Jesus did was not only socially unheard of, it was a bit offensive to anyone that understood the power rankings and how it should be. Have you ever noticed that Jesus had a tendency to annoy, because this wouldn't have been just socially, inappropriate. It would have been offensive to all the power people. They understood how this worked, and he was dismantling this. Because in Jesus' day, have you noticed that he annoyed the people in power most? He would eat with people that he wasn't supposed to eat with. Because to eat with someone in the ancient Middle Eastern culture meant you affirm them, that you were affirming that you had a relationship or a connection to this person. So he eats with people like tax collectors, which if you were a liberal Jewish, social justice, liberal-leaning Jewish person, you would have been so offended that he would eat with the tax collector. They were part of the problem, man. They were part of the system, the capitalistic greed machine that was taking over and oppressing people, but he ate with them. But he also annoyed those who were more traditional, conservative-leaning Jewish people because he'd eat with prostitutes and social outcasts and people that shouldn't have been touched or been around, and he would entertain them. But I think maybe the most offensive group he ate with, especially in 2022, were the Pharisees, this intolerant holiness group of people. See, in our culture and day and age, you tolerate everybody except intolerant people. And Jesus even tolerates intolerant people. Jesus is the most open-minded person you'll ever meet. He's motivated by love for all of his creation, and he serves into them, even people who maybe are difficult to serve. Does that trigger you a little bit? Listen, if the words and actions of Jesus don't trigger you, you're probably not reading him right. Last week, I made this statement that Jesus is calling us to be a church, a humble church, and a humble people. That one of the greatest gifts we can bring to Toronto or wherever you are is to help people know God, love people, and impact our city for good. If you know God, you know he's love. And if you know God, you're automatically going to be loving towards people. And if you love people, you're going to want to serve them. So we take the example, these last verse that Jesus mentions here. Jesus said, I have set before you an example that you should do as I have done. We get to do this in this world just as Jesus did it. Let me lead you with this one quote from a bishop in Syria in the 4th century. He said this, he who wraps the heavens in clouds wrapped around himself a towel. He who pours the waters into rivers tipped the water into a basin. And he before whom every knee bows in heaven and on earth knelt to wash the feet of his disciples. Let me grab some words of Jesus in conclusion. Go and do likewise. Know, love, impact. Let's serve together.